because I love you all so much, I want to get you started on this exercise and give you something to work from, a little bit of a way to get going on the exercise, and I'll walk you through the first couple of steps. But what I really want to begin with is encouraging you to read this very carefully, because everything that's in here is something that I've learned from working with students in the past, is something that you need to think about and need to pay attention to. So I'll run through some of this, but I want to make sure that you realize that it's not just fodder. It's really useful, directly useful stuff to read. Okay, so we have a number of files that are in play in this transform, and the first one is one you've already created, and that's that's your instance file, complexbcresort.xml. And the only thing that's wrong with it as it stands, as the way you uploaded it, is that it's missing an attribute of the root element. So you can just go ahead and add that cur resort, I think it's called, the cur resort element. Is it called cur resort? Yeah, the cur resort attribute on the root element, and list the resort that you want to transform. Mine's called BCO1. Yours might be called whatever. I don't know what your cur resort is, but the instance as you uploaded it needs that in there as well in order to make everything happen. We'll come back and talk about that again in a second. Okay, so I've given you a starter file. The starter file is a kind of a somewhat simplified version of the web page, but it's not drastically simplified. Mostly what I did to the web page, and that's the web page we started from, was make it well formed and clean up all the bad, ugly HTML, missing attribute quotes and all that kind of stuff that made it unparsable as XML. And once I've done that, now it basically is going to serve as an XML file. In fact, we're going to take it in a minute and paste it wholesale into our transform to get us going. Okay, so play around with that. Get that file to the point where you understand basically how it's structured as an HTML file. The better you understand its HTML structure, the better you're going to be able to transform it into an XSL file and add values to it from your instance file. Okay, so that's file number one, is the HTML abstracted page. File number two is a starter file full of XSL commands, all of which you can use in order to make this happen. You should use every command that's in that file, and all the commands are, they're pretty much in order of the way they go in the XML file, so I would pay attention to that. And these are all the files that are going to be your resources for how do you make this transform happen. I'm taking you in a pretty big step here. You know, I haven't walked you in little steps into the transforming business, because I want to get into the transforming business and out of it quick enough so that we can get on to some more interesting and pertinent things having to do with information structure. So I'm kind of dumping you right into the middle of transform land, but to help you, I'm providing you with a lot of the commands. And so you won't have to think up the commands. You'll really just have to figure out how to piece them together to make this happen. Okay, so file number one is the abstracted page. Excuse me, file number one was your instance file, complexbcresort.xml. File number two is the abstracted page. File number three is a file that's a resource file. You won't directly work with this file, but you'll pull things out of it as you need them. Okay, so now I want to walk through the basic process that we're going to use here, and then I'll begin to actually demo it. So we're going to begin by creating a blank XSL file, one that has nothing in it. We're just going to add one root template, the one that matches /, and that's going to be our starting point. Then we're going to take the HTML sample page, the one that I just showed you earlier. That's the abstracted page. Go away. Take that page, and we're going to paste it into the XSL. When we do that, we will have a working XSL file. It will reproduce the page precisely, but the reproduction of the page is going to be false because it won't have pulled anything out of the instance. It'll simply have reiterated the page that we fed into the transform. And I'll show you, if that doesn't completely make sense, I'll show you how that works in just a few minutes. But what we've done there is we've established a valid starting place. And that's the key to what I believe is your absolute best way to approach transforms, especially complicated ones, is always begin from a solid starting point that works. Then take one step, try to make it work again. If the step doesn't work, maybe you want to back out of that step entirely, go back to where it was working and try a different step. So do these steps one piece at a time, trying to get your XSL closer and closer to the product, and you'll know you're at the product basically when you've used up all the commands, you've made use of all the commands that are in that XSL starter file. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now let's go do it. Okay, so I've already set up Oxygen to have the files that we need in it. We have the instance, and notice in the instance there's an extra attribute right here on the root called cur resort, and that cur resort attribute has the ID of the resort that I'm going to transform. In this case it's Apex. Okay, so that's the first thing to notice about this. We also have the starter HTML file, and this literally is an HTML file. This is basically a view source off of a page on the web that's just been cleaned up, and so it's an HTML file, and I'm going to safely get rid of some of these things. We don't need to see the style tag, we don't need to see the link tag, and I might even play around with this a little bit. I might close it down so that I'm just seeing divs, and if I do that, that's going to give me a nice way of let's see, a nice way of seeing the file from kind of a distance, like a zoom out view of it. Okay, so I just have that stats container, and I have this div called list body, and then I have this div called list content, and I'm going to mess around with it until I feel like I got a basic handle. And frankly, the basic handle that you need is on the divs. The divs are what really structure the page, right? Each of those divs is a container on the page that has certain content in it. I've closed it now down to this major div, the wrapper, with the 4 sub divs that are in it. So I made it really simple. And now, just the way I told you in an XSL file, or excuse me, in an instance file, I might reveal each of those divs one at a time just to kind of get a feeling for how is it working, how is it put together. And the other thing I want to pay a lot of attention to is what's content and what's the structure of the page. What stuff am I eventually going to be pulling out of the XSL file, and what stuff will I be leaving behind because it's creating the structure of the page. For example, this div, this tag right here, this tag is not content. That's the structure of the page. This one, on the other hand, this H1 tag, that's content. I'm going to pull that out, and I want to try to figure out what exactly is that. It turns out that that's the title of the site. If I go in here, I look here, this is going to be this one. It said British Columbia then, and now in mine it says British Columbia, but that's what that is. That's the title of the site. That goes at the top of the page. And I might look at some of the rest of these things, like this one here, the title. This is the title that goes in the title bar, and that's the title of the resort, Apex, a diverse selection of bowls. So I'm going to look for that, Apex, a diverse selection of bowls. It's actually the title dash the tagline. Okay, that's how that little piece works. Title dash tagline. So right now I'm just kind of playing around with this file, and I'm trying to figure out how it works, where to go with it. And I'm also focusing in on what is structure and what is content. All of this stuff is all content, right? These are all the paragraphs that make up the description basically of the resort. Here again I have the resort again, the resort name, but this time instead of having the resort dash tagline, I now have resort dash, and this turns out British Columbia to be the title of the site. So BC Snow title, now I have Apex dash that resort name. So these are all bits of information that I'm picking up. Okay, so I have a well-formed file here. If I click the little well-formed indent thing, let me close up all these tabs. You'll see that it indents just fine. It says format and indent successful down here, so I know I have a well-formed file. Alright, so the final thing to look at here is the sample commands, and they're all more or less in the order that you're going to need them. I'll demonstrate how to get the first couple of them in there to get you started, but the rest of them really are up to you to figure out how to piece together. Okay, so step 1, just look at all the files.